Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back. It is our custom to go around the room and say our names so that we can see who is present here with us today. Give a little space so we can really sense yourself here. I'll start. I'm Len.
I'm Douglas. I'm Benjamin.
I'm Pat.
My name is Michael.
I'm Monty.
I'm Johnny.
My name is Mark.
My name is Cass. My name is Glenn.
My name is Harley.
Harry.
Mark.
My name is Prasada Chitta.
My name is Ryan.
Vince. My name is David.
My name is Ricardo.
I'm Brad.
I'm Patrick.
Ben. Peter.
My name is Ed.
I'm Oswaldo.
David.
Philip.
My name is Gary.
My name is Chandler.
I'm alternate.
Jay. Don. Yeah.
My name is Jerry. I'm Cal. I'm Richard.
My name is Tom.
My name is Michael.
I'm Jim.
Leo.
And I'd like to introduce Carol Newhouse, who's been here many times, I believe. She has studied insight meditation for more than 20 years and has been teaching for 10. Her root teacher is Ruth Dennison, who was empowered by the great meditation master Buba Keen of Burma. She has also studied with Dr. Rina Sarkar at CIIS and Dr. Thin Thin in daily life practice. She is the founding teacher of the Lesbian Buddhist Sangha in Berkeley. Welcome back, Carol.
Thank you. Hi, guys. It's very nice to be back. I'm going to add that with there's about 10-year lag in that, so I'm going to. It's like more like, just add 10 to everything. Let's see. Oh, and also I'm thinking of starting a private practice in Berkeley because I'm moving back from some of my straight jobs in the world. So you may be hearing about that. More of a transpersonal sort of approach to therapy, which probably wouldn't surprise you. So this is going to be a bit of a travelogue combined with Dharma. I'm calling it the spirituality of travel. Recently, some of you may have realized I often try to bring things here that I'm actually going through or things that I've recently experienced and then bring Dharma practice and theory into it and kind of make sense of it all because, as we all know, really the practice is our lives, right? And it's about integrating as much Dharma, whatever that means to us, into almost every moment. And for me, I'm a great traveler and I love to travel. And I have been doing that since I was young. And so since I came off of a really exciting trip this summer, I thought I would try to talk some about how I integrated the Dharma in the moment and how I've been doing that since I've been back and share that some of that with you. So I need to set the scene a little bit in that it was a 2-week trip to France. And I went with a close friend. We were both lesbians, still are. And at least when I last checked with her. And we were lucky to have some time with 2 other lesbians one American and one French, who live in France. And they were part of our experience and were able to take us around, and especially the one who lives there was able to really open up the experience. I've been there before. I do speak French, so I had some sense of it, but this was really special. So I wanted to kind of set the scene. We went to Paris for a while. We went to Tours. For those of you who don't know, that's a smaller city in the center of France, in the Loire Valley, which is the big chateau place where everybody goes to look at all the kings and queens' constructions. And very beautiful, beautiful area, very well known for its wine country. And then we spent the last week in Brittany, which is a very different culture. You may know it's a Celtic, actually, people still speak the Celtic language there. There's a lot of history, right, between Normandy and Brittany and England for many, many years, things like the 100 Years' War, things like that. And it was a seacoast on the Atlantic, right, and a fishing village. So a couple of the experiences I'll talk about happened in that context. So probably many of you travel. I'm kind of picking that neutral word for it. People sometimes say I'm taking a spiritual pilgrimage, right, or I'm going on a journey, or the mundane word, I'm taking a trip to, right? But in all those words, I think there's a lot of ability to sort of plan and sort of make an intention, right, when we go on a trip. And it can be a very practical one, kind of goal-oriented, right? I want to see this. I want to make sure I go to this museum. You know, maybe I want to have an experience with food or culture. But from my experience, no matter what I think my goal is or, you know, the plan, travel is a different world, right? And depending on the degree of difference that you're, you know, and spontaneity you're going to integrate in your trip, it can be somewhat unexpected what happens. And of course, I would recommend that you lean to that side of it. Don't plan too much. Because I think it is a real experience, any kind of trip, but particularly one abroad, to really experience ourselves in a kind of a spiritual, integrative way. Many people use the language of quest even, right? I mean, you've heard that? So those people really set a spiritual intention, right? I'm going on a quest. Sometimes they don't know what they're looking for, but some kind of spiritual evolution or something like that. So it can be a location, right, that somehow holds meaning for us, a country, a culture, maybe even a specific landmark, right, like a sacred mountain, something like that. It could be actually man-made, right, like a temple or construction or art even, right? There's a lot of spiritual art. It's so rich when you really think of it. Some people, when they actually have a strong spiritual practice, actually go after, right, the steps or the places where their teacher, who's now on another plane, right, like the Buddha, for example, lived, right? So there's many people that make, northern India, a kind of a quest. For people that are Christian or Jewish or Muslim, there's other places. I mean, look at Jerusalem alone, you know, the meaning that has for people. And then ancient sites, not so much what's left, but what used to be also, right? Like I made an amazing, what I did call a pilgrimage to Crete years back, and I don't know if you know much about that, but that's sort of the Bronze Age kind of place where there was a whole other more matriarchal, more equally balanced between men and women spiritual culture that was just thriving and very peaceful in its time. And so for me as a woman, it was important to go there, and it was very moving. I think also there can just be a felt connection, sort of elemental connection to places, like a certain body of water. You know, I have to see this lake or something. Or I have to experience this volcano or, the fire element. It can, of course, be earth, all kinds of beautiful earth places that have a certain energy for us, and even air. I've heard people say, and I'm not so familiar with this, but there's certain breezes or wind storms that happen in certain places on the planet, and when you go there, you can you hear things or you're experiencing things differently. So, it can be on so many levels. But the connection to the Dharma for me really comes through this issue of the root of suffering that the Buddha talks about. And one of the ways of understanding, of course, is the clinging aspect, or needing things to be a certain way. Grasping after certain things, which you're all familiar with this probably, and then clinging to them once we get them, right? Needing it to solidify in that way. So you can kind of see what I'm leading up to. Traveling isn't really the best thing to be doing, if that's what your idea is. Because in fact, there's a lot of unpredictability, right, about traveling. So I see it more as an opportunity to break conditioning, right, and to break your patterns. And whether we set that up ahead of time, I'm going to a certain culture because I want to be different and experience something differently, or whether we're just kind of surprised by what happens, and even when we do set it up, right, it will challenge us, right? And there can be a certain kind of dukkha, that's the Pali word for suffering, that comes with this unpredictability or change that we might not expect while traveling, right? It can be a positive thing in a way, like the opposite of dukkha being sukha, like you can see an amazing sunset or stumble on this just gorgeous village, that you didn't even know was there. All these things can happen. And then also they can not happen, that you make the turn and it wasn't the right turn, right? Or it's too late, or the museum is closed, or for me, you're in the train station and you're on the wrong track. I don't know if you've traveled much in Europe with the trains. They're absolutely amazing, right? Wonderful. But you kind of got to know the system, right? Just like an airport. I finally figured out it's like the airport, but it took me a while. Well, yeah, because it's exactly the same. There's a giant board and everything's listed, and if you just pay attention. But I just wasn't as familiar with the modern train system. So we were standing on a track and there's no train, And I think that my mindfulness practice really helped me to realize that. I'm not kidding, I was a little more present, than the other person. We have 10 minutes and there's no one here, And that's unusual. And so I was able to find my way out of it. I'm kind of making a joke of it, but see what I'm saying? These little things, these unpredictable things they're objects for our awareness, put it that way. And they arise in a positive way, I think, when we're traveling, in many beautiful surprises and moments. And then there's the disruption that can also happen if we're solidifying things and we're expecting things to be a certain way, which is what tendency, right? Traveling can be a great practice. So I said there's unpredictability, there's change that happens, there's surprises. And I also think, for me, as I prepare for a trip, especially when it gets really close, there's a certain kind of heightened feeling or sense that kind of starts to happen. There's a kind of a dreading about whatever that I could imagine could go wrong. And then there's all this kind of excitement thing. I'm finally going, wow, and all the stuff you have to do to prepare, of course. And so if you think about the Dharma, one of the teachings is to be very aware of our sense-based experiences, right? That's the second and third, maybe, foundation of mindfulness, to really get it, that our mind-body process is telling us or signaling things to us all the time. We just need to be there, right, for them, to read them. And that's what a lot of the body-based practices are about. So I think, again, this kind of heightened vigilance that one can have when one's traveling, can be even a little nervous in the train station or somewhere, also is an opportunity, right? Depending on how you use it, to realize that you have kind of like being opened up by some kind of drug or something. You have this anticipation and this open-heartedness. So naturally, in a way, maybe a more childlike, right, open-heartedness. So maybe in a way we become more naturally mindful, more naturally alert to what's happening. Increasing awareness of what's important and what is not also. If it's not a very short trip and you start moving into something, you begin to see you're making choices, right, about what's really important here and where you really want to go and who you really are and what's important. So in a way, we're challenged, but I think we're also charmed by the unexpected. Now, that's in our lives, of course, all the time, right? But these kind of trips set us up for it. So in spiritual travel, there can be a goal or a destination, but being present for the journey is what really counts, right? And people say that about your life. But again, this is a real constructive moment that you can focus on. One experience I had that the four of us were in the Loire Valley, in Tours, actually in Chinon, outside of the city. And Brigitte, who was the French woman, was trying to look for this little chapel that she had heard about. And there was a reason we wanted to go there specifically. And she finally finds it. So it's one of those things where we're going down little roads and we make turns and we don't know where we're going. And I was thinking, oh, whatever, And she turns it and parks, like in a place that looked like nowhere to me, near a little woods or something. It's okay, I'm sure it's down here. Okay. So we walk down there, and eventually there's a little brick sort of pathway, and the area opens up, and we're on the side of a mountain, really, or really a hill, we would call it. And there's this chapel that's somehow built into the hillside that you could almost walk by if you didn't kind of see the doorway, and there's some trees, sort of. That's it. So she knocks on the door, and nobody answers. And now it's already 7 o'clock at night, right? Of course, it's light there still. This is summertime. And she says, oh, it's probably open. I'm thinking, open? And she opens it, and it's open. And there's a couple of people in there looking at this sort of fresco, beautiful kind of image inside, which I won't get into today, but that was the reason we were there. And then a couple of my friends start walking off to the side. Now, this space couldn't have been bigger than maybe half this room. So it's a really small, ancient kind of chapel. And then there's this little archway and kind of like a little hallway going along to the rocks. And I thought, well, I'm going to follow them. Where are they going? We walk in there, and suddenly my sense of space changed. And I actually used my Dharma practice. I took some breaths, and I thought, am I scared? Or, something's shifting here, And I thought, no, this feels okay, but there's an energy or something, and I'm walking along. It wasn't very far, maybe just the back of the room maybe was curving around. And now it was very small, and I looked to my right, and there was this kind of passageway, but you couldn't really walk down there, and a little light at the end. And at the end, there was this body of water that was somehow lit up. It was almost the color of this cloth, a little lighter blue-green. And I looked at this thing. It looked like a jewel or something, and I burst into tears, And I'm not the kind of girl who does that kind of thing. I mean, I can do it, but, I did it. But, it's not that, oh, wow, look at, that kind of stuff. It was just happened, And then, so again, be with us, And I was a little embarrassed because my friends were standing off to the side. And I just let these tears come. And what I got from it, basically, was that, first of all, kind of a relief that this was still there. Secondly, a deep, deep sadness that I had taken so long to come back here. Those kind of feelings. And I just let it be. I didn't try to get into, oh, well, why is that? Is this a past life? Why is this a Christian thing? Like, what's going on? Just being with it. But then I turned to my friends, and I just grabbed them and held them, and only for a minute or two. And even though this was a public, not a lot of people, there were still a couple of tourists, I think, or strangers that were coming up the hall. So I just moved back, and I thought, well, I'll get to go back later. Turned out I didn't get to, but to me, that's what I'm talking about. How when you open up for a journey like this, a spiritual kind of travel, that our practice really, really sort of aids us as far as being there for it and being intuitive and staying with it and not being either scared or threatened or not wanting to go off on this journey with a woman who I didn't really think was going anywhere, kind of thing. Later on, I found out, because there turned out to be a person there who was actually going to close up soon, who was like a docent, was somebody from the local village who knew the story of the place. And she actually told me that this was a pagan well from really ancient times before the Christians came, or the Romans, and that the local people had seen it as a healing well, and it was particularly dedicated to seeing, that if you drank or put this water on your eyes that you could see more clearly, and that it was boarded up for many, many centuries once the Christians came, and people had thought it had been destroyed somehow, but miraculously in more modern times, when some more liberal Christian person got there and decided that they should open up the place, they found it again. And the structure was still intact, and that the local people remembered that the Christians went there on St. John's Day, which is the 24th of June, to pray for a while, in between this boarding it up and unboarding it and boarding it up. And then at one point they didn't allow anybody to go there anymore, especially on St. John's Day. Well, that's summer solstice, basically. St. John's Day is a corruption of summer solstice, really. And it all makes sense. People would go there, right, to this well, at the height of light, the longest day of the year, right, for reasons for seeing better. So this was something I knew nothing about, that apparently it's kind of only a local thing that people know about. And I wouldn't have gone there if I hadn't been more open and seeing it all more from a deep, more mindfully aware place. Another part of this is that two of the women who I went with actually had a more goal-oriented thing they were doing. And I'll just talk about one of them today. But hers was, she was looking for Joan of Arc. And I only found this out maybe a week before we left, that she had been reading about Joan of Arc, and she thought this was a great lesbian character. Not that she was a lesbian, but, the warrior and the leader. And I thought, well, I guess, sort of. And we actually went, it turned out synchronistically that Touraine, this La Loire River Valley, is one of the places where she spent a lot of time. And there were a lot of places that you could actually go and see where she had heard voices or had spoken to the Dauphin, the guy who she made king, and where she had spoken to her armies and things like this. And there was one particular story that we followed only because my friend was so into this. That there was another teeny little chapel in a different town. And the story goes as that's where St. Catherine didn't speak to Joan there because St. Catherine was disembodied. But there were voices that Joan heard of St. Catherine were telling her that she could find her sword to lead the armies in this church. And it came true that she did. And we actually were there. And so it was some kind of integration in a certain way of ancient stories in a very real way, and allowing myself to follow this story, of my friend, that turned out to be really very deeply meaningful. And by following like an individual, in other words, in our tradition it would be Buddha or past Buddhas, or I have a friend who went to Puto Island. I don't know if you know that, but on a search for Kuan Yin, or quest to be with people who worship Kuan Yin and Goddess of Compassion. In this case, it turned out to be sort of similar for me. And to really try to integrate, after a while, the qualities of this woman, very much like we would integrate the qualities of, say, Kuan Yin or the Buddha, by being there right? And the actual land and walking in the places where these people walked. So I found that Joan's faith, her trust in herself, right? And her spiritual path, which was from very, very peasant class. So to be able to talk to kings, and to do this kind of thing was quite out of the ordinary. So it was really her spiritual belief system and her dedication to practice, as the way we would say it, I think, that drew her forward into history in this way. Another episode I had that was very similar to that was that Bridget eventually took us to Brittany, and her family, part of her family still lives there. I didn't know that. Her mother actually had a house there. And the way that she talked about her culture and the way she exposed it to us, and I'm sure you've had those experiences in other cultures, made it come alive in a certain kind of way that it couldn't have, and drew things out of us that it never would have, I think. And one day I was talking about how I had Celtic ancestors and I have a hard side of my family that's English, but I'd always been more drawn to France, and it just came up in a conversation. And she said, "Oh, well, we have to go to the Standing Stones." I said, "Well, we can't go up to England. We could, actually." She said, No, they're right here. I said, "What do you mean they're right here?" So I'm going to pass the postcard around. It's too bad I didn't do a PowerPoint. That there are 2,500 at least standing stones that exist in Brittany, right near the Atlantic there. And just as dramatic, I imagine, although I've never been to England, to that part of England anyway, or more so in a certain kind of way than the British Celtic experience. And it was just so interesting to me to see how the French are treating that. It's sort of like, yeah, those are the stones, And they will talk to you about history, but the spiritual part of it, is quite separate, I think, for most people. And that gets back to their rejection of the Catholic Church and anything religious. And in a way, there are Buddhists that practice in Europe, as I'm sure you're aware of, and in France there are some, particularly through the Tibetan traditions. But the common people, just see them as a very important historical thing that doesn't have any kind of spiritual significance, really. Maybe a little or something. And my experience of that, of course, was quite different. I felt like there was a synchronicity that was happening, that I was being led there, in a certain kind of way that I never expected. Again, the unpredictability of life and the ability to share of yourself a lot of times leads us, especially when we travel, I think, because we go a little bit further, right? We share ourselves. We have to talk to people. We have to get in there, right, with people. And somehow things happen. Those of you who like to read travel books, is it just about the places? Yeah, they're pretty, but it's really the connections, right, that we make. And I call that spiritual. I call that spiritual awakening in a lot of ways between people. So I had amazing, wonderful experience there. I felt very, very moved just by the fact of being led there. And my experience also, telling it back to the French people, that was interesting. I just realized they were sort of woken up a bit. Really? You felt kind of an energy, and you wanted to touch them. They're just rocks, and stuff like that. So it was a really beautiful exchange in a certain kind of way. Okay, back to the Dharma. I think that travel can be a really strong antidote. It can be a really strong antidote to sankhara dukkha, which is the kind of suffering of separateness. Sometimes we do feel sort of alone when we travel, right? Depending on how we do it. But then we're kind of forced not to be alone, right? Because we have to ask for directions, or we get bored, or someone just approaches us, right? And the real sense of no separate self, I feel, that they talk about in the Dharma, this issue of self or interdependence, right, can really, 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 really be experienced, right, through travel. through spiritual orientation to travel. Travel in search of places or connections to our ancestors as well can reveal a deep and almost cellular sense of connection to humanity. The woman that I didn't mention so much was doing that more. She had an ancestor, some queen, I think it was Eleanor of Aquitaine, ever heard of her? With some ancient person that has a lineage in her family. So it was interesting to be with one who was really going after the saint, or the Buddha, whatever, and the other one actually had a person whose tomb she could stand by, right? But it was the same thing for me. It was this connection, with the cycle of life, birth, as the Buddha says, birth, life, death, and regeneration. Whether it's physical, from actual DNA that she may still carry, right, from Eleanor of Aquitaine, or whether it's just more a felt sense of a spiritual practice. If you think of the Dharma, we talk about lineage a lot, right? Some people take it very seriously, right? What is transmission, especially in the Zen sense? What is that? That is an actual, I see it as an actual energetic exchange between, say, a student and a teacher. It can happen in the moment, it can happen over years, and eventually you're asked to teach. You're given permission to teach, right? To me, that's a spiritual connection, and I talk within the Vipassana Ubakin tradition about lineage and about how me, as a white lesbian feminist, had a European woman teacher who's about 25 years older at least than me, who brought the tradition from Burma, right, who sat with U Ba Khin, who was actually a Burmese civil servant. He wasn't actually a monk, right? And that's very interesting because a lot of us here in the West have used this not in the monastic order, right? And we've created sanghas like your own, right? Like my own also. And then he actually was transmitted the Dharma from a farmer. Now that's already kind of merchant class, really, if you want to think of it that way, a rich farmer, but who had had a lot of tragedy in his life and went to seek the truth, which by that time, now we're in the 1800s, was really a path that people did, right? They just left home, sort of like the Buddha, if they could, and left their wife and children there with the farm, and they went off to find the truth, right, if they were hurting. And then he found Lady Sayadaw. He found a very, very educated monk, right, in Burma, who was waking up to the fact that already the Dharma was dying and that he needed to translate everything into English and from Pali and into Burmese, both. And that's the lineage. That's the far back as my lineage can go. And the more I talk about all this, the more I realize how deep these connections are. Do I need to travel to Burma? Right? That's the connection with travel. Perhaps, I'm waiting to see if it happens. My karma seems to be more in Europe right now, so I don't know. But it may. I know two spiritual teachers from Burma, and they may go, and if they go, I'll try to go with them, but I may not have to. It's always a question, right? But if I do, I'm sure that I'll get even more in touch with these things. So, past, are connections imagined or intuitive connections? However we want to understand these things, it does provide us with a felt sense of interdependence. And that's what I meant by the lineage piece. And a oneness with all of humanity that I find is very comforting. Right? To me, it's very comforting to realize that we've all been doing these things. It can also be depressing. Depends on how you want to look at it. But we've all been building civilizations, right? And then kind of destroying them or let them fall apart, or nature takes over. And then we rise again, right? And we do something again. And each time, some people would say we spiritually evolve. Some teachers would say that's the point of all this. Through travel, I think you can feel some of that. You can really feel that struggle for truth, and dilemmas around it. Okay. Cause and effect, karma, right? That's what I'm talking about. It's not the study of history really the study of karma when it comes down to it. And for those of you, I know there's some of you here that are interested in history. And to me, history, again, is what I said. It's a reflection of a process, right? Of seeking for truth and for beauty and for love. As you know, misguided as we can be. So I'm going to try this last one here. I've tried to explain this to some other friends of mine. They kind of just look at me. So, you get that glassed over look. But I know you'll get a sense of it. You may have already experienced it. One of my Dharma teachers travels a lot also, Lama Palden in Fairfax. And she explained it to me, and it worked for me. So I'm going to try to share it. It's simple and it's not simple at all. So, my partner didn't go with me to France. She stayed back, and I wanted to communicate with her a lot. So we FaceTimed, right, on our cell phones, on our iPhones, almost every day. Okay, so now it is 3 p.m., right, in California. And she's going to try to get in contact with me, and it's midnight in, say, Paris or France. And it's dark. It's really dark, and it's light, right, over there. 9 hours difference. She pushes a button, right, on her phone, and I appear as I push mine. However, there's 9 hours difference. Everybody would agree to that, right? They would not argue, and it's the truth on the relative plane. That's how we can even operate, right? We created this. We had sundials before. We were just trying to figure out how we could relate to each other on the relative plane, right? However, in that moment, is there 9 hours difference? No, there's not. So where are we? Who's talking? What's going on here, right? So I would say that's your present moment. And in fact, that is, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, the only moment. And all the rest of it, as you know very well, is made up. What I just said 10 minutes ago is gone. It will never come back, even though it's recorded. That moment is gone. And what's going to happen as we walk out of here, we don't really know. Now, I know that you've been told this a million times, right? What, this FaceTime thing or this Skype thing. Just do it. Even if it's not your thing, especially with somebody, I would say, that's pretty far away. Because if they're in California, it's a little harder to get it. But when they're 9 hours away and you push that button and you see it's dark outside over there, and that's what you expected, and it's light where you are, and you're talking to this person right now, you have to realize that you're in another place. And that's the place we live. Okay, so that's the best explanation I can do of trying to relate the Dharma, right, to spiritual travel. This didn't happen the first time we FaceTime. It was about the third or the fourth or the fifth time I began to think, whoa, what's going on? How can this be happening? Yes, it's a technical marvel, but it's more than that. So, awakening to a heightened awareness of my own spiritual path as an individual happens a lot for me, and I think that's why we do these kinds of trips. But also my connection to my fellow travelers, because I did have people, as I explained in the beginning, that I was watching, and going with, and they were kind of on a little quest of their own. And then, of course, my connection to others on the path while I'm there. The Buddha had to leave home to achieve realization. And they call it that, leaving home. That's what they say, right? And it wasn't just a cultural thing. That's the myth, or the true story, depending how you look at it, that he left one environment, right, that was very structured and pleasant too, into another environment that was not structured at all, the outside of the palace, right, that had its beauty but also its serious challenges, right? And somehow he knew that he had to do this, right, in order to achieve enlightenment. I don't know if I'm going to get enlightened through travel, but it just provides me with so much. For me, travel holds within it a guarantee almost, or at least a strong invitation to practice. So by challenging our willingness and our ability to receive these many gifts of the unexpected present moment, we can really use these experiences as an offering, really. So thank you. If it's okay, I think we have maybe, 10 minutes at least? 10, 15 minutes?
About 10.
Yeah. I'd like you to just take 5 minutes to turn to a neighbor or so and share something about what I just said about travel. You know, a challenge you might have had or a spiritual moment you might have had, or how you react to the idea of this. Can you do that? Okay. Just pick somebody, anybody. Thank you. I know, I just took it all in.
It really was gorgeous. Carol would like to offer you a few minutes here to feedback or what's arisen out of this talk today. Feel free for a couple of minutes to talk about that. Anybody?
Yeah, just an observation on my own travel and sort of relating to what you say. When I think about traveling around, you know, I sort of look at the experiences through two views. You know, what I see or what I look for are really, you know, sort of wonderful experience. But when, you know, sometimes I'll be describing an experience to someone and I'll realize that, you know, this is really, you know, this is pretty mundane experience. And it's like looking at the Grand Canyon. You know, you can go there and you can see a big hole, or you can see a marvelous experience. And the mindfulness says that, you know, if we really begin to recognize the source of all this, we really begin to recognize that we're the ones who put into this what's there. And that's really one of the most marvelous things about having these kinds of experiences, because we can really go there and have an experience of the way we perceive, the way we color, the way we live our lives, you know, and perhaps the way we've lived our lives.
Yes.
Anyone? Tom?
You know, it made me realize, your talk made me realize that when I do travel and get out of my routine, it makes me feel younger, because I think it reawakens this sense of capability to solve new problems. You know, whether it's the train station or whatever, just like when we were kids, everything was new.
Right.
Learning how to get from here to there, ride a bike or whatever, but it sort of makes me feel more capable.
That's great.
Yeah, sure. David, and then Count Dave.
I have this phrase that's probably used, it's called vacation mind. And what you know, you could be in Paris or another city and you're not familiar with, and you're walking down the street and you notice everything. You notice the buildings, it's all fresh, it's all new. And I'm always thinking, I got to bring vacation mind back to San Francisco, where I'm not just walking down the street planning and I miss the sun and the beautiful buildings and the people. More aware, more in the present.
That's why I travel so much, to try to remember that, you know, and then hold it as long as I can, and then get on another plane or something.
Good. Hal?
Well, I was reflecting that when I travel and I see beautiful places, eventually it sinks in that Mother Earth is beautiful everywhere. And to be privileged enough to see how beautiful it is in one country and how beautiful it is in another country, and just sink back into the roots of our sustenance, which is Mother Earth, is a great thing. You often, living in one place, you start to take it for granted. Although it's pretty hard here in San Francisco.
Yes.
Hi, I really appreciate your offering today. It's exactly what I needed to hear. What comes to mind is that, as I was sharing with Mark, for me, this experience is something that happens because I place intention and I have a mind. I don't know how long ago it started, but I have a mind that has been exercised in this. So when I traveled to Coos Bay, Oregon to study higher consciousness with Ken Kais, the late Ken Kais, my arrival in the town itself already sparked the beginnings of a great story. Just the arrival. So I put it out there that there's something about exercising these neural pathways that actually cause it to happen more and more and more and more. It happens to anyone and everyone. It's not just the Buddha, it's everyone. So, thank you for reminding me of that.
Thank you. And we'll have your last comment.
Thank you so much for your sharing this. Again, for me, it just clicked so many clickers. I'm just so fortunate to travel a lot and for long periods of time. And, it's evolved over the time. Now I like to go and stay for a couple months and volunteer in places and get into the culture, but also to get to know the people and hopefully they get to know some of me in our culture. But for me, this also allowed me to be aware that, I can go to South Asia and study with some Buddhist people, or go to India and study that. But for me, it's also like everyday stuff. When you have a smile or a glance at a guy pulling a bullock by hand, or a beggar, or, just the ordinary connection where you just realize we're all connected and we're all the same and everybody's trying to deal with the same thing. And that for me is what's just so warming and just makes me feel so wonderful walking down the street and being able to give a smile to somebody.
Thank you. Comment.
I'm really grateful for travel and all the things that it's brought us. It's brought us Ube Kent's teachings, and the ability to learn from people all over the world. And I can resonate with the way your mind is shaped when you put yourself in a whole different culture. And in this conversation, I'm having this nagging sort of feeling of how unsustainable global travel is to our planet, and how I have this kind of fear of associating with being spiritual. Not to say that it isn't, but also to say that it's really totally unsustainable. That's just I just thought I would share that.
On that note, whether we journey far or just journey for our homes to the Sangha or journey within, thank you, Carol, for really opening up that pathway for us to look at today. Thank you. Next week's speaker will be, once again, the Sangha's David Lewis. He will present part 2 of the series, The 4 Foundations of Mindfulness. And that will be on the feeling tones, sort of what Carol mentioned today about mindfulness in that area. And so look for David next week. The Pali word for generosity is dana, and dana is what we need to sustain the Sangha. We ask for your generosity to help sustain the speakers, the facilities, the Larkin Street Youth Program, the outreach to prisoners with newsletters, and a suggestion donation of $10 for Donna is very appreciated, and the host will walk around with the bowl to receive your offerings. Is there a host today? Where is he there?
I'll be walking around. So, yeah, please stay and enjoy the fellowship of the Sangha. We have refreshments. There's hot water for tea. If you have tea, please wash your cup with hot soapy water. There are things to, some vegan treats. And there's a sign-up sheet for new people who would like to add their name to our mailing list. And at 12:30, some people gather at the front door and go to lunch together. It's open to anybody to join in. So just gather at the front door at 12:30.
Any other announcements?
Today is the day when our newsletter goes out. Normally Jack Busby organizes the mailing party, but he is traveling in Italy right now. So I'm going to be doing it in his absence. So I need about 8 to 10 volunteers to stuff envelopes and fill up newsletters and put stamps and labels on them. Could I get a show of hands of people who can do that?
When would this take place?
It starts in about 10 to 15 minutes after this. 10, 15 minutes from now. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So can I see that show of hands again? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And you had an announcement?
Yeah.
Sure, even though your hand's up first.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah, you can bet.
Okay, sure. I'll turn Nathan here. 2 announcements. Tonight in Berkeley, there is a chanting circle led by Doug Von Koss. It's at the Finnish Brotherhood Hall. You can find out more information at menschant.com. The second announcement is you may have noticed on the bulletin board my smiling face and a request. The request is support around where I am to dwell in the future. This weekend will be my departure from a home that I've dwelled in as a renter for 17 years. Due to the owner move and eviction, the flatmates and I are moving on, and I am still yet to determine a place to call home. So I offer to you, men, that I'm a lifelong student of higher consciousness and mindful living, and would welcome being your student and community member if you have a space in your home. And please get in touch with me, as I'll be looking forward to finding that new community of people to live with. Thank you.
Certainly. And Jim?
Yeah, last week we had a fabulous retreat, and I just wanted to acknowledge Michael Murphy again for doing such a great job in making it happen. And David Lewis gave luminous talks about karma. We were all greatly edified. And Tom and Jerry provided essential support services. And it was a wonderful weekend. So if you went there, you know something special. And Michael, thank you again for taking us.
If we could all circle around our dedication. Please remember Johnny, Harvey, and Benjamin are new to the Sangha when you're in the lobby today. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.